Hello and welcome to a tennis seminar on sort of stress management and disease control, and a certain aspect of pest control as well. So hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm here with I'm Henry Bechelet, Turf technical manager for ICL, and I'm here with Glenn Kirby, who is technical manager from Syngenta. Hi, Glenn.
Hi, Henry. How are you?
Very good. Glenn comes from a golf course management background as a practitioner. Sort of, so he's got like 120 years experience in golf course management. I think that's what it is, Glenn, isn't it? Something like that.
Yeah,
he's a lot older than you.
My age.
No, so but Glenn's been sort of in his current role as technical manager for Syngenta for a few years now, and so has become sort of a technical expert as well as a sort of a practitioner. All right, so the idea here is that we'd sort of just like to talk specifically to a sort of tennis audience. It's something that we don't do very often, and with a couple of technologies in some important areas. Yeah, so we're going to talk about stress management. We're going to talk about disease control. I will at the end actually also sort of summarize where we're at with the insecticide Acelepryn, which you might be aware that it's on an emergency approval for other areas of turf, but at the moment it's not approved for use on tennis. So maybe me and Glenn will explain why that is, and also give you an update on where the full approval is. Okay, but let's sort of make a start. The session is being videoed, just in case there's other members of staff who couldn't attend, but might be interesting to sort of catch up on. So we'll supply you with the video of it, and yeah. So the other thing you need to know is that on the right hand side of your screen, you should see there's some drop down lists. There's a chat function there, and so feel free to sort of interject with any questions that you've got. I'll be keeping an eye on that, and I'll ask any questions that you've got on your behalf. So feel free to do that. And also what I'll do through the course of the presentation is try and act on your behalf if I feel it's kind of relevant, to bring out those kind of points that specifically relate to or might be beneficial in a sort of lawn tennis situation, because lawn tennis court management is very particular course of turf management, and it's got requirements all of its own, isn't it? It's a summer sport, so we've got a significant amount of turf stresses in the game. Stress management, is vital. Wear tolerance is extremely important, with wear being focused in quite a small area and in particular locations, both inside and outside the court, and so can directly affect playing qualities and player sort of traction and stability. The surface integrity, because we're reliant on ball bounce, the surface integrity and the turf quality and the level of ball bounce are all really important, unlike most other sports. So we've got quite a challenging situation going on, highly stressed as a result of summer use, a lot of wear and tear, but the surface playing qualities are kind of vitally important. So we've got a challenging situation, and also we've got significant renovations that will be required generally at the end of the season, sort of late summer, early autumn, depending on how it goes, I think, more than anything. And these are usually up against the clock. So quick germination and establishment and sort of new seedlings are also sort of part of the mix, that we're sort of that renovation, getting that done early enough. But, you know, when it is slightly later, sort of hastening that establishment process is also really important. So Glenn's going to sort of lead the way with a couple of presentations, one on high cure that you can see at the moment, which is a sort of turf biostimulant based on amino acids that is all about stress management. So Glenn's going to cover the background to stress and then how the technology can be used. And then we've got a new fungicide that you can use as well, that you need to know about, and called Acelepryn. So Glenn's going to talk to you about that, and then at the end but maybe me and Glenn will talk about the latest situation with Acelepryn. So remember the chat room. I'll keep interrupting you, Glenn, but otherwise, take it away.
Very good, thank you, Henry. Yes, indeed, I am going to talk primarily about the two products, but around there, we've got a lot of other areas to touch on. So when we're talking about biostimulants, we're going to be looking a lot at turf stress. And when we're looking at the fungicide, we're going to look at disease management strategies. So in this presentation, I've got a few things to cover. A little look at why Syngenta are investing and working in biostimulants and biocontrols now. We'll have a little look at what high cure can do. And Henry's done some trials on this product with us. So if we can resist the temptation to delay our conversation until that point, we will open up the chat about the trial work we did with Henry and his team and look to see how some of that can get utilized in tennis. So from a turf management point of view, the picture is golf, but in all sports turf, we are looking at more and more integrated turf management. Syngenta is traditionally a chemistry company, and that has been our historic role. But we recognise more and more that chemistry isn't the solution by itself, and that integrated turf management is critical. This ITM triangle, these strategies that you may have seen of laying the foundation with good cultural, physical, mechanical operations, good monitoring and modelling, biological, and then chemical at the top, that doesn't really change much. You know, when you start looking at cultural, you're looking at things like cutting heights, fertility. When we're talking mechanical, that's hollow coring, that's your renovation processes, that's scarifying, it's all of those kind of operations. Where we get involved at Syngenta is much more this top end of the triangle. Now, traditionally, we were the very top section, but increasingly, we're going to be looking at biological, biostimulants, biocontrols, and better monitoring, modeling, and digital support tools to help people pull that together. The chemistry is still vitally important and the key part of our business, but we are recognizing as we move into the future and we go down the path onto that horizon, that these other technologies are going to become increasingly important. And to support all of that, the digital tools are going to become very important as well. We've already got a number of digital tools on the Greencast website with really good weather data, historic disease pressure, growth degree day tools. We're doing more and more to track pests as they hatch, to understand timings, and we're looking more and more into satellite NDVI measuring of sites. They're all areas that we move into. But what I'm going to talk to you today about is biologicals and high cure in particular, which is an amino acid and how it plays a role. And it complements our existing technology to help people deliver the best surfaces. We're there to support turf managers. When we move into more robust and more difficult regulatory challenges, biostimulants are going to become a bigger part of the solution. But we need to do it, and we want to do it in a data-driven way, in a very scientific way, to continue the trust that you already have in Syngenta as a brand. So what I want to look at you today is amino acids and the role of amino acids within the plant. Well, I want to look at how plants respond to stress. That's a very important factor here. And even if you never consider using this as a product, there should be some stuff in there that will help you manage turf in a better way or understand things. We're going to have a quick look at high cure and how that integrates into those two bits. Look at how we can build some stronger plants. I might touch a little bit on user trials. Most of the trial work we've got is in golf, so not directly relevant. And maybe Henry can jump in there and we can talk about some of the work we've done with him and see just how you could integrate it into a program for you guys. And then a brief conclusion, and we will get started. So amino acids and proteins. Amino acids is a term that many people have heard. And it's one of those things that I heard a lot when I was managing turf, and I kind of brushed over it because I was always a little bit embarrassed to say I don't actually know what an amino acid is. And I usually kind of, if anyone asked me, I'd probably say something like, well, I learned that at college and, you know, look it up, and moved on. But actually, it's quite a simple concept. An amino acid is simply a building block. It is simply a individual piece of Lego that is there ready to be built into a protein. So an amino acid is one of those, a small piece of Lego. The next term you'll hear regularly mentioned by people when they're trying to promote products or explain how they work is the term peptides. Now, all a peptide is a series of amino acids. So in this situation, it is a block of amino acids. And you can have very short chain peptides, which is only 3 pieces, or you can have very long chain peptides, which is more and more and more pieces. And they are all about the speed that it gets released. Only small short chain peptides and amino acids can get absorbed by the plant. So what you need is for these long chain peptides to get broken down in order to be used by the plant. But ultimately, all of these small building blocks that are in amino acids go towards building the protein. Now, in my situation, my protein is my Stormtrooper Lego head that I got at Christmas and has never got out of my office because I've used it in this presentation all the time. So that's our protein. These are our short chain peptides. These are our amino acids. Now, the proteins is ultimately what the plant needs, and proteins play very key roles in how the plant works. They are a component of cell membranes, they are antioxidants, and they counter free radicals, which is all part of how the plant copes with stress. They provide heat protection. They're a key component of chloroplasts and that photosynthetic process. They play a key role in the biosynthesis of enzymes and hormones. They regulate the function of membranes. They play a key fungal defense role. Proteins are doing everything in that plant, and they are built from raw blocks of amino acids. Now, to go into the science and start looking at them at a molecular level, amino acids provide the basis for these N compounds to plant growth. Now, you'll notice in that symbol down there that nitrogen is in there. So in every amino acid, you will have a nitrogen molecule. And then you'll have this structure of 3 hydrogens, 1 nitrogen, 2 carbons, oxygen, and you'll have this R leg. And the R leg is what all of the different second sections of that amino acid bolts to. So every amino acid will have this, and then all of them will have a second section bolted to it. But they're organic compounds, you know, which means they combine carbon and they combine hydrogen bonded to each other. Now, there are about 20 different amino acids involved in plant growth, but there are hundreds of amino acids outside of plant growth, but there's about 20 of them that are key to plant growth and metabolism. Here's a few of them that are particularly important. Proline, hydroxyl proline, that's an antioxidant that helps protect against damage from free radicals and osmotic stress. So during the summer stresses, proline is very, very important. Glycine is a precursor to chlorophyll production, so helps keep the plant in a much healthier position later in the year when things are starting to become challenging. Glutamic acid is also a precursor to chlorophyll. Plays a key role in N assimilation, so it helps the plant function much better. And alanine is a precursor to all those plant hormones. So they're just a few of the amino acids that are out there. And hopefully the key concept there is just understanding the simplicity of proteins are the really important bit that do the work in the plant, but actually the plant needs amino acids to build them. So how does the plant respond to stress? When we move into a stress situation for the plant, and that stress can come from a number of different places. It can come from climatic pressure, environmental pressure, stress that you are imparting because you're lowering cutting heights, stress from the people using that tennis court, those tennis players consistently playing in the same area. We see those stresses and they become high energy demanding processes for the plant. We start to see an increase in free radicals. We see that photosynthesis reduce, carbohydrate reserves start to deplete. We see reduced respiration and less energy produced. Once we've gone through all of that, the nitrogen uptake from the soil and the amino acid production slows down. Now, in a normal situation where we have very healthy plants and we have all the conditions right, the plant is very capable of producing its own amino acids. It will produce all of those that it needs. The problem comes when we start stressing the plant out, it no longer produces its own amino acids. And it starts to break down its proteins by itself to reform them into whatever it is it needs that it's losing. So it takes its Lego heads, it pulls them apart, and we start creating our own amino acids because it can no longer create its own. That is a stressful process for the plant to go through. Henry, I see your face has appeared.
Yeah, no, I magically appeared because I just at this point I wanted to just kind of step in because you know that's the nub. That previous slide is the absolute nub of the situation, isn't it? That when stress is in the game, the plant responds by actually sort of drawing from its own reserves or breaking up sort of its own tissue, if you see what I mean, and in order to sort of rebuild. And you know, in tennis, as you mentioned, you know, the stresses are sort of highly concentrated, highly amplified, and from a number of different sources. And so, you know, this is a common occurrence. And of course, we've always kind of been aware when we've watched the Wimbledon coverage or whatever it is of the sort of wear and tear that's involved. And I should say, sort of, Glenn, that Neil and his team at Wimbledon have used amino acids for a number of years now, because simply for this reason, you know, with this sort of level of understanding of kind of that stresses are so much in the game that and you'll move on to it now, the importance of supplementing amino acids then becomes sort of really important in this scenario. Okay, so I just wanted to just sort of, you know, just have a stopping point at that and then just sort of, you know, emphasize the point and then allow you to go on.
Yeah, it's great, and there is a definite role for amino acids, and understanding the science will help us make better decisions about selecting the right ones and then understanding how they're slightly different and using them in the best way. And just to support this slide, we've got some studies that we've looked at here. This is looking at creeping bent grass and gradual heat stress. So as we look at this graph, what we have through the let me go back. What we have here is we have the temperature along the bottom axis. So in this situation, we have sustained the plant to a consistent temperature of 20 degrees. In this one, we've gone 20 and then we've upped it to 25, 20, 25, 30, and so on through this axis. And then on this left-hand axis, we've got total protein content. And what you can see is as we go through the increased temperature range, we see this reduction in this total protein content. So this is as we move through the temperature stresses, the plant breaking down its own proteins as it moves into stress periods. And we're probably fine at 20, 25, but once we start moving above 25, then we see this significant breakdown. And when we tie that into the weather conditions that we experience in the UK, particularly in the south, it's not unusual for us through July, back end of June, to be sustaining regular pressure above 25 degrees. And of course, we're only talking about one stress here, aren't we, Henry?
Yeah, there's loads of different stresses going on, but I just wanted to interject because, and it's an unfair question, definitely. Is that sort of air temperature? Is that canopy temperature that we're talking about?
That there will be air temperature.
Oh, okay.
Not canopy temperature. But canopy temperature is a different question again, isn't it? And you and me have spoken about this a little bit this morning, and the kind of regular figures that get bandied around for cool season grasses, which came out of a Beard and De Paulo study in the early 90s, was an air temperature of 23 is the end of your optimum for cool season temperatures. But no, sorry, it's not air temperature, it's canopy temperature, and it regularly gets misquoted because we can have temperatures of 23, 24 degrees, and I suspect canopy temperatures, particularly in the stadium environments that some of these tennis courts are going to be in, particularly at Wimbledon, those canopy temperatures, I reckon, will be up in the 30s. So we move quite quickly outside of those optimum temperature ranges in the UK, particularly in the south of England, through June, July, August.
I bet you Neil has measured that. I bet you he's kind of saying, yeah, it gets to 40 degrees, whatever it is sometimes. But yeah, so I mean, that was my point really, because we're sort of dealing with, you know, sometimes quite sheltered environments, and you know, with limited airflow and this, but the sun beaming down, and so these are sort of, you know, really common occurrences for you know, a lot of tennis courts.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we start looking at these figures and relating it to what they're going to see in their environment, this is the same study, but in this study, we have measured amino acid content, Henry. So we've got the same study along the bottom, same temperature raises, and we have the amino acid content up the left rather than protein. And what you can see through here is as we have dropped down, the amino acid content is dropping quicker. So at that 20 to 25, we're seeing a reduction in amino acids. So we're seeing the plant reduce its ability to create these raw building blocks, even when we start moving into mild stress. But what's really interesting in this one is once we get to the tail end and we've gone through that journey, those protein breakdowns have finally caught up and started to deliver more amino acids on their own basis. So when we think about what we're trying to do with an amino acid, we're trying to deliver these things to the plant when it starts moving into these stressful conditions. So we're trying to target an amino acid product around the stressful periods. Now,
yeah, so the plant doesn't sort of have to break down its own structures to be able to cope with it.
Yeah, indeed. It's going to start depleting the number of amino acids, the more stress is being imparted on it. And we're just looking at temperature here. We're not looking at lowering cutting heights. We're not looking at scarifying. We're not looking at rolling. We're not looking at moisture content. All of those are additional stresses, and they're all going to be having an impact on the plant's ability to make its own raw building blocks. When we're delivering amino acids, we want to understand the optimum time to deliver these, and it's when the plant is entering into stressful periods. And that nicely leads to my slide of lots and lots of different stresses, which is exactly what we've just discussed. The physiological stresses, drought, cold, heat, shade, environmental and chemical, nutrition, air pollution, salinity, and let's not forget the stresses that we impart through both play and through the maintenance that we do whilst we're trying to create those surfaces. Now, there are some other factors. We've got some biotic stresses, and they are worth talking about: diseases, pests, weeds. This is a biostimulant, and it will have no impact on diseases, pests, weeds. But what we can do is use these kind of products to put the plant in a much healthier position so that it has a much better tolerance to diseases. There is no activity on them themselves, but we can try to use these to put the plant in a much better position to cope during those stresses. So what we've got here is a little study looking at turf injury under heat conditions, and it's the first clue to one of the challenges that we've discovered the more research we've done, and that's looking at some of these rates. So in this study, we've got a percentage injury axis down here, The most injury we saw from heat stress was 40%, which is this untreated over here. 25 litres a hectare at 14-day intervals. We reduced that down to 20%. By using HiCure at 50 litres a hectare on a 28-day interval, we only managed to reduce that to 32%. So a big improvement, but in this one, in this study, it would look like more regular intervals or closer intervals would be more effective. But that wasn't something we saw consistently through our trials. Okay, so we've spoken a bit about what amino acids are, how the plant uses them. Now it's worth understanding what HiCure is and how we can utilize that better. So in HiCure, we have a number of free amino acids. We have a good chunk of these raw building blocks. We have a number of peptides, both short and long chain, and we have very few proteins in there. If you look at this graph and you look at the bar chart version of it, so the one underneath this grey, green and blue line, this is the breakdown of HiCure and how the amino acid structure looks in there. So this is a percentage down this axis, and this is the molecular weight. So the smaller the molecular weight, the smaller or the more broken down that amino acid is. So at this end, it's very much in the protein or long chain peptide range. At this end, it is very much in the raw amino acid, free amino acid state. And you can see in HiCure, we have a very large percentage of these free amino acids. We have quite a lot of short chain peptides and not many long chain peptides. If you look at this purpley kind of red line, this is how other amino acid products typically look. They tend to be much more concentrated in this long chain peptide area. Now, if we think back to some of the things I mentioned earlier, these long chain peptides need breaking down in order to be utilized. So they become a bit more of a slow release type program where you need to get them into the root zone. They need to get modified and broken down by microbial activity and then absorbed by the root and taken in. Whereas if you look at what we're delivering with HiCure, with much more free amino acids, which is readily absorbed by the leaf, and these short chain peptides can all be taken in by the leaf, and it's something that we want to deliver to the foliage during the periods of stress to put the plant in a much better state. So whilst you may already have amino acids in your program, you might want to look at how you're using them, understanding the science behind this, and look to see if you're using them in the way to get the best out of them. Because our main target is foliar absorption. Amino acids and short chain peptides are readily absorbed by the leaf. These larger peptides get broken down in the soil into smaller units and then root absorbed. Now, that's not a bad thing. It's just understanding whether you're using them in the right way. You have to be much more in advance to allow this breakdown to happen in time to deliver it to the plant at the time it's needed. In HiCure, we have 63% amino acids and peptides from natural origins. It's high in that proline, glycine, and glutamic acids that we spoke about earlier that are critical to getting the best out of your photosynthesis and during these high drought osmotic pressure situations. There are 10% free amino acids in there. This is a very, very well put together product that's been thought through and delivers exactly what we're trying to deliver at the right time. There's 10% organic N in there. As you would have noted when we were talking about the molecular structure of it, nitrogen is a key part of an amino acid and it is very slow to break down. So if you're looking at this in your nitrogen program, it really doesn't impact anytime quick. It's a very slow breakdown and slow availability, and there are 18 different amino acids in there. From an application point of view, an application rate, we haven't got a strong, firm piece of data that supports an exact application rate, because this is strongly about timings. This is strongly about delivering it at the right time around stress, and we're not seeing uplift in turf quality. This is all about sustaining the turf quality you go into that stress period at that level rather than seeing it drop off. But the work we've done, we are very comfortable looking at 20 litres per month during the summer heat stresses, split between however many spray applications go on through that period, and 10 litres a month during the autumn and the cooler stressing periods. Guidelines for optimum results are every 2 to 4 weeks, start before the stress is expected. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to deliver these amino acids right at the time where the plant is going to start breaking them down and reducing its own production. We want to use higher rates for monthly intervals and when conditions are more challenging, but the tighter those windows are, the more chance we've got of hitting the optimums. Very readily and easy to tank mix with other products. It's a great tank mix with Primo Max in the spring and the summer. Can be tank mixed with fungicides if required. We've seen some nice results through that. And our application rate's 200 to 400 litres of water. It's a very flexible product. But critical, this is part of that ITM strategy. And all those good ITM strategies are built around good aeration, good nutrition, good cultural practices. These are the marginal gains that we bolt on top of that in order to deliver the great services that we work hard to do. So with HiCure, we've got some free amino acids that rapidly enter the leaf and protect those cells. We can provide a direct source of energy which can be utilised immediately by the plant, helping conserve that plant energy through lost nitrogen assimilation and protein turnover. So this is all about building a stronger plant. We've got some trial work here just to support what we've seen. We did some work at STRI last year. During lockdown, we were looking at the benefits of amino acids and pigments during stress periods. What we've got here is the maximum temperature that we hit through the period from when we started this trial on the 19th of June through to the 17th of September. And Yorkshire STRI isn't renowned for its high temperatures, and you can see that it indeed didn't deliver any particularly high temperatures. We've got temperatures here ranging from what we got here on the 28th of August. We hit a massive, what's that, 13 degrees. There's a maximum temperature that day, but we did deliver some heat stress through the back end of July going into beginning of August, a sustained period in there. Now, we do have nitrogen in that program, in that HiCure product, so we needed to match that with something else to ensure that the results were all about the amino acids rather than nitrogen input. And we used Green's Master in that situation, which is a great product that ICL sell and is the base of a lot of people's programs. So we are comparing it with something strong. By adding HiCure and Rider in, however, what we managed to deliver was during that period of stress, we allowed the plant to utilize those warmer heats and gave us an uplift in turf quality, and rather than a downturn in turf quality because of the heat stress that was being delivered. So that small period in Yorkshire where we started hitting regular temperatures over 25 degrees was enough to make the most out of that HiCure program. Interestingly, at the beginning of the program, where we weren't seeing the heat and we weren't seeing any stress really imparted on the plant because it was a trial situation, we weren't seeing the benefit of it. From an anthracnose point of view, we've done some quite nice trial work looking at that. We've got an untreated control here looking at turf quality, and you can see around the 13th of July, we started to see a downturn in turf quality from anthracnose. That was due to the anthracnose pressure that was in place. By introducing HiCure, what we managed to do was sustain a little bit longer the turf quality we had. So for around a month longer, we managed to sustain the same level of turf quality. But we did turn downhill and we did go backwards. And once we were in August, results were fairly similar. Now, from a fungicide point of view, anthracnose is a particularly tricky one to get a grip with. This fungicide application was put in and we saw an uplift in turf quality. We kind of paralleled with the HiCure during the summer, and then we got much better recovery later on in the autumn. And whilst it's not the result I would hope for from a fungicide, I would much rather be in the position on the 14th of September than having applied it than having not applied it. But what was really interesting is when we couple these two technologies in an integrated fashion, we managed to hold on to both sets of benefits. So when we're looking at these integrated strategies using amino acids in amongst fungicide programs to hold on to turf quality, to give the plant the best opportunity, coupling it with other technologies is enough to really drive us forward.
Yeah, and anthracnose in particular, Glenn, is particularly related to stress. So it's almost like a barometer, isn't it? And so it's quite useful, although you might kind of think, oh, well, in tennis, we don't have a lot of anthracnose going on because we're primarily dealing with perennial ryegrass. It's kind of that's not the point really. It's just the sort of that sort of demonstration that the benefits are there to be had, but you know that they have to be integrated. You know that you sort of as always, your programs benefit by linking different technologies together, and of course that's you know what you're trying to say really with aminos is they form a part of the program rather than being a magical solution.
Indeed, yeah, and you know I've got some user trials in here, Henry, but your ones that you did at Harrogate Golf Club, which gave you a real hands-on experience of this, are probably more relevant than going into those. So do you want to share what we learned from those trials and how we feel we could integrate this into people's programs?
Yeah, I kind of like as part of our sort of partnership agreement, really, we sort of undertake joint trial work together, and sometimes that's funded work, you know, such as sort of getting other people to do it at the SDRI. Sometimes it's kind of like that, I'll, you know, do some stuff myself. I sort of do quite a lot of field trial work, and so was it last year? Last year I did a sort of high cure trial, but I was looking at individual treatments of high cure, but I was also sort of integrating the high cure with you know other programs, you know, containing plant growth regulator, seaweeds, and you know liquid nutrition and all this, that, and the other. And you did see the benefits of using it on its own, I've got to say, but it was kind of like you were saying, it was marginal. You know, the turf that I was looking after was sort of annual meadowgrass on a USGA spec golf green that was being put deliberately under stress. But you could see how high cure on its own showed an improvement. Whether the turf was of an acceptable quality remains to be seen, but there wasn't any additional fertilizer going on there. It was really quite a false situation. But it was when you added it all together, you know, when you sort of put it in with your nutrition, you put it in with the sort of seaweed, you put it in with the Primo Max, you had Rider in there. Which is a turf pigment which you know you probably wouldn't use during the playing season, but there are benefits to be had maybe outside the playing season. But when you sort of integrated the high cure in there, you get really remarkable results, you know, and it sort of really did display to me that, and again probably the reason why Neil's been using it for a number of years, his particular version of it, that you can add things together to sort of reach those heights of turf quality, even in really stressful conditions. What we didn't get last year in Yorkshire, and you know the Wimbledon trials are sometimes carried out up here, I know that, is we didn't get a particularly hot and dry summer, as you'd already sort of mentioned, but I always had stress in the game with my trial. It was kind of either nutrition or stress. There were times when the temperatures did get up there, and so I was able to see sort of the differences. The untreated control plots were devastating by the end of the trial. And I did run it through autumn as well, where we were not only looking at those abiotic stresses during the summer, you know, those environmental stresses, but then through the sort of autumn where biotic stresses or diseases sort of enter into the game. And again, you did start to see those kind of just those benefits of stress mitigation, really. I think we put so much stress on our turf that we need to sort of help it out at times. But the one thing that my trial didn't have in it was that sort of understanding that the timing of the applications to coincide with those periods of stress is all important when it comes to this technology. That sort of having them in as part of routine maintenance or routine timings might not show those benefits if stress isn't in the game. But if you can just time that application for when things are ramping up, then that's when the benefits started to show.
Yeah, we're doing some more work on that this year, Henry, to look at optimum timings and the value of programmed approaches against really dialing it into those heat stresses. But Neil, as true to form as you said he would, Henry has popped up and said that he's seeing inside the stadiums turf grass canopy temperature is 10 degrees warmer than the daily forecast suggests. Now, God. You and me, we did a little project this morning where I was pulling out the odds down here on the south coast where I am of being over 23 degrees for, I can't remember exactly what it was. It was something like 7 days in a row, wasn't it? We looked at.
Yeah.
And for us, that was 3 to 1. Every 3 years, we see a period of over 23 degrees for more than 7 days in a row. Now, you add the 10 degrees that Neil's talking about there to that on canopy temperature. He's up in the mid 30s.
Oh, yeah.
7 to 10 days in a row, at least 1 in every 3 years. So
yeah, no, and in the last couple of years, they've had record temperatures during the time of the tournament, so
yeah, when I work the averages out, that's an average over a long period of time, and it feels like the trends are for it to be increasingly stacked towards this end of the data set that I pull out. So it does make sense as to why we need to look to all these technologies, do really good research on how to use them and how to get the best out of them, and then put them in the right places. And it feels to me like temperature definitely needs to be looked at there. That's a big stress.
Yeah, particularly relevant, I would say.
Very good. Okay. I've got some golf data, but I'm not going to go into that too much because we've kind of.
No, I think you've kind of said what you needed to say on.
So just to really conclude on high cure, the power of biostimulants is huge. I think we've all known as a turf industry for a long time that there are big benefits and opportunities to use biostimulants. We were probably using seaweeds in turf before we were using nitrogen, so it's nothing new here. The refreshing thing for me is I'm now working in an environment where agriculture is adopting this technology. Agriculture means that Syngenta will adopt it. That means they will invest some serious money into research. And I'm really looking forward to sharing the science and supporting data around these products and being realistic about what we can actually expect. There is definitely a role for these in turf. But we've got to be realistic. We can achieve some amazing results. In some glasshouse trials, we have seen around 300% boost in seedling development with 3 applications of high cure during renovation periods, which could be a great opportunity for you in tennis. Now, it's a glasshouse trial. We're not pretending you are going to see anything like that in the field, but there is definite benefits. And we're working in football at the moment to really understand the impact of that and get the best timings. And we'll share the outcomes from those field trials with you as soon as we've got them.
Yeah, actually, we might have the results back from those, the preliminary results back from those, because they're sort of being carried out now in time for the autumn renovations for these guys. In terms of timing and sort of when you apply this stuff to sort of hasten those kind of establishment rates, because it's all important for these guys.
Yeah, really important. And again, another glasshouse trial. And glasshouse trials are great because they give us an opportunity to control all the variables. Once you step out into the field, there are so many more variables to deal with. It makes trial work very tricky. But we have seen in those glasshouse environments 50% less damage in heat stress situations. When we were moving turf up 21, 27 degrees in that range. Now, I suspect, looking at Neil's situation, we are going to be far in above that because we're not dealing with canopy temperatures there, we're dealing with ambient temperatures. And from a recovery point of view, we've seen significant recovery benefits when treated with high cure because we're putting that plant in a much better position to bounce back. It has the amino acids it needs, it has those raw building blocks to build those proteins, at an appropriate time. So glasshouse trials show us the potential. What we've got to do is do the science, the trial work, and really commit to this and share the results to help you get the best out of it in the field.
Very good.
Just to summarise, turf has this natural opportunity, maintaining turf quality in challenging conditions. These are marginal gains, you know, don't get sucked into the 300% figures. They're glasshouse trials out in the field. These are marginal gains, but marginal gains are what we need because they all add up.
Yeah, and not just during the playing season, at the end of season renovation time as well.
Absolutely. Very good.
Good. Well, that's great. I don't know whether there's any questions on the chat line. I've been looking. I can't see any. But feel free to get in touch with us, you know, subsequently if you need to. So that is great, Glenn. So that's a sort of, it's not a new technology. It's certainly a new formulation. I think the one thing that sort of, you know, has opened my eyes a little bit, Glenn, about that presentation is that, you know, all aminos aren't the same. And you always find this in the biostimulant area, you know, it's kind of like, you know, it's, you know, it's quite loose, but with what people are sort of able to sell and what people are prepared to say about stuff. But we, you know, I think we're all happy that Syngenta are kind of entering into this marketplace, the wild west of biostimulants, because you'll put some decent research behind it also.
Yeah, and I think if I've learned a lot about it as well, Henry, and I think if I could offer some kind of guidance when selecting an amino acid, Pica is 63% amino acids. So when you're looking at it and you're comparing it to other products, it's a bit like comparing nitrogen to nitrogen. It's comparing something that's 63% nitrogen. A lot of the other ones in the market are around 20%. So just be aware of what you're putting out, and then you can look at your rates and actually correlate the two products. Look at that nitrogen percentage as well. For 63% amino acids, there is 10% nitrogen in there. So if that ratio is different on other ones, there is added nutrition in there to try and give you a response. We have really tried hard not to do that at Syngenta and just give you a close to a raw amino acid product as we can. The flip side of that is when you apply it, you don't see an instant result. Now, understand what that instant result is coming from with other products where there may be additional nitrogen added into it.
Yeah, same old story. Okay, so let's move on. Let's move on. There's a new fungicide you've got to tell us about, Glenn, and that and it'd be quite sort of easy to say, oh, you just got a new fungicide for it, but this is a big deal, isn't it? And it's so they don't happen very often, and they take a huge amount of work to sort of bring through. And I mean, I'm sure you'll explain about it in more details because the approval hasn't been as broad as we'd hoped, but that's of no interest to these guys particularly because they can use it in enclosed environments such as tennis courts. So yeah, we'll move on now to a new fungicide and what, you know, hopefully what that'll bring, because disease control is also huge for these guys.
Yeah, so certainty, like you say, Henry, it's a new fungicide, and whilst that is our core business, you'll notice our portfolio we don't have a huge number of products in there. It's very exciting to be able to bring a product to market. So it's nice to be able to introduce Acelepryn with the active ingredient solatenol in it. From a research and development point of view, this was in development for over 12 years. So when we deliver something, and myself and Dan Lightfoot, the business manager, are getting really excited about it, you can probably understand why we've been waiting a long time for these products. Over 30 scientists involved in the research work with this product, and more than 800 active ingredients were deeply investigated on this journey. And this is a really useful slide to prompt the challenge. We live in a world where environmental quality and human safety is increasingly important. And the reason we got this slide here is to kind of demonstrate the similarities between the regulatory framework and the pesticides and products we bring to the market and compare it to Formula One. In Formula One, you've got the regulators increasing the safety year on year on year. Every year, they will drive down or increase the number of safety measures that need to be put into Formula One cars. The engineers team from the racing cars, or the engineers jobs from the racing car companies, is to develop cars that continue to go around that racetrack at 200 miles an hour. But the regulatory pressure is there to ensure it's safer, to the point where Romain Grosjean got out of his car crashing into that barrier. I don't know if you remember, but that was around the time when we initially launched this product. And it's just a very good demonstration of the increasing regulatory pressure and the job our engineers have to do to deliver these products. Now, that's why we're so focused on biocontrols and biostimulants as well, because they are going to need to get bolted around these products in the future to help people manage turf better. But in this situation, we have developed a product that has got through. So the active ingredient name is benzovindiflopyra. It's a bit of a mouthful, so globally it's called Solatinol, which is much easier to remember and pronounce in many languages. The first turf-specific formulation was tested in 2011. So even once it's gone through its development stage, 2011, a decade ago, was when we were first testing this in turf. That's how long it takes to get these things through the regulatory framework to market. When this slide was produced, there were over 75 field trials were carried out in and around Europe to help develop the formulation of Acelepryn. I've done quite a few since this slide was put together. So it's got a huge amount of data and supporting information around it. So we got dual action in there with very complementary chemistry. We have the Solatinol element of it, which is a pyrazole carbomoxide. It's an SDHI, very balanced systemic movement with strong binding properties, early curative and preventative action. The difenoconazole element of it that is in there, that's a triazole, which is a DMI. Very balanced systemic movement, strong binding properties, and curative and preventative. This really is the best fungicide that we have in our portfolio, and the work we've done on it and the supporting data is pretty impressive. So from a group point of view, there is another SDHI out there in the market, but for us, this is our first SDHI. It's a different group. Application rate is 3 litres a hectare. It comes in a 3 litre pack size. It is limited to 2 applications per year. And this is where Henry and I have kind of danced around this subject a little bit. It is limited in its area of use, but for a lot of you guys in tennis, you can use it. The restrictions are enclosed professional sports turf, where access by wildlife is extremely restricted. We'll touch on that a little bit later, just for clarification, to make sure we all stay within the restrictions on the label. Active ingredients, I've already said, Solatinol and difenoconazole. It's a suspension concentrate with 23.6 grams a litre of Solatinol, 78.9 grams per litre of difenoconazole. Let's put that into perspective for a second. 23.5 grams of active ingredient shows how potent and powerful this product really is. There is so little active ingredient in here, which is what we need to get it through registration, but actually the results it delivers is phenomenal, and it's an amazing piece of work behind the scenes. From a label point of view, it has fusarium patch, dollar spot and anthracnose on the label. This is a trend we will see increasingly. It takes so much work to get the data that we need to get these through the regulatory framework, but we are increasingly going to deliver these products with less diseases on the label. And as time goes on, we will build the data and add the diseases to the label further down the line. Now, it's a dual systemic. Interestingly, when you read the label will claim it has contact and systemic activity. One of the systemics is very slow, one of them is at a nice pace, and we'll look at some studies to support that. From an application point of view, you can spray it with a pedestrian control sprayer or vehicle mounted. You need to use a LERAP Freestart nozzle. That is a restriction that's being introduced now. So we've got a new class of chemical, new mode of action, very potent with low active loading. very balanced, systemic with high stability in the leaf. So how does it work and how can we help you get the best out of it? So from a biokinetics point of view, biokinetics was a word that I'd never heard of until I joined Syngenta. It's all about how products move in the plant. And Solatinol has got very good photostability and very non-volatile. What that means is when it goes on the leaf, it sticks there, it stays there, and it doesn't get, or it's very slowly degraded by UV light, so we get excellent longevity out of it. You've got very balanced systemic movement, so it moves nicely through the plant. It's not moving too quickly so it disappears and gets cut off at the tip. It's moving quick enough so it distributes itself through the leaf. There's excellent binding activity in the leaf wax. That's really important, and it's part of the formulation teams to help make this product stick. So when you're applying it, it sticks to the leaf, it binds into that leaf wax, and the better a job we can do of that, the more we create this reservoir that slowly gets released into the plant over a good period of time. And all of that leads to this excellent stability within the leaf. So if we have a look at optimum timing for application, what we have at the bottom there is the Solatinol element of the active ingredient and the difenoconazole, all adding up to a certainty. Now, when that pathogen is sat outside the plant and it hasn't gone into it, this is the optimum time to get control of disease. It's when your population levels are at their minimum and we want to apply them. In this situation, it's the Solatinol that's bound into that leaf that does a great job in the early stages of preventing diseases. Once that pathogen starts growing and inserting itself and getting into the leaf, we are in the penetration period, and this is preventative. You visually still wouldn't see it at this stage, but this is true preventative strategy. Solatinol and difenoconazole both doing a great job for you at that period because you've moved it into the plant. We are there to protect it. From a curative point of view, once it's really kicking off inside that plant and all that mycelial growth is happening inside, this is the first opportunity you're going to get to see the stress on the turf. That's when the difenoconazole is doing its job. It's moved into that plant much faster than the Solatinol, and it's going to be in there protecting it. And then the real visible signs of disease, when things start kicking off, when you get this blistering and this reproduction of all the spores, that's when we're talking about eradicant type strategies, and the difenoconazole is doing its job in there too. So a nice, well-rounded pair of active ingredients that sit nicely together. But none of that is any good unless we can deliver it to the plant in a really good way. And the formulation team at Syngenta have done a great job of creating excellent droplet retention and really strong binding into that leaf wax. We've got some magnified images here. Now, if we go back to the days of Chipco, we were applying around 5 kilograms of active ingredient to a hectare during that period. We now look at what we're delivering, around 24 grams of Solatinol per hectare. We have got to be very, very effective with a very small amount of active ingredient. And if you look on the right at the Chipco image, you can see how it was very crystallized, very large active ingredient chunks. And because we were throwing so much of that active ingredient around, we got away with some very poor quality active ingredient and formulation. Now those products have to be milled to such a fine level in order to get really good coverage across the plant. And you can see from that image, as a comparison, just how much we've moved on and why we've been able to move to these much lower active loadings, which are much better for the environment and for human safety. So acidity, we get uptake from the leaf, crown and stem. We get dual systemic movement into new growth, and it replenishes itself over time. Gets taken in to that plant. But because we've done such a good job of the formulation, what we see, which is quite unusual, is a good wide range, or a good control at a wide range of water volumes. You can see in this trial, the untreated, we were seeing around 23% microdocium, but in all of the treated areas, from 125 litres a hectare water volume up to 750, we were bringing that down to around 2%. Optimized formulation means that it's very effective in a wide range of pHs. I'm very happy with it in 5 to 9. When we're building products, we have to make sure that we can use them around the world. So they'll be used from everywhere from Dubai through to Canada. The formulation needs to work for all water hardnesses, pHs, and different water qualities. So all of the buffers and everything that's needed are built into this product. It's also very active against soil-borne diseases. It's not root uptaken, but it's very active in thatch and root zone. It's very effective on fairy ring and very good on take-all as well. So that's about delivering it to the right place. And if they're diseases that you are targeting, it's understanding that we need to get it off the leaf, we need to get it down into the soil to target that disease. That's just thinking about your application methods and what you can do.
Yeah, we did a lot of work in terms of sort of the pre-launch work. We did, I think it was in the end 4 years of sort of selected user trials on this, and what became clear after the first year was that the product was really good against sort of, in that case, microdocium and anthracnose, and so we didn't bother sort of checking it on that. Afterwards, we focused on fairy ring control primarily, and yeah, it's really good. And I know it is an issue for tennis courts as well. What you tend to sort of find is that first of all, it won't be on the label, but it might be something of interest to you, and you would need to apply it specifically for, you know, soil-borne reasons. But obviously fairy rings can have not only a sort of detrimental visual effect, it can affect surface playing qualities. You know, there's no two ways about that. And when ball bounce is so important to us, that becomes a critical issue. And so what you don't find is that it'll be sort of an instantaneous knockback, because quite often the symptoms are remnant, that they're the consequence of activity, maybe nitrogen release or whatever that has already occurred. But what you can find with the product, or what we did find with the product, was really good levels of control or suppression, or whatever it would be called, the following year after application. And so again, that might you know, be an important point for or an additional point for the use of this product.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a strong product for fairy ring, and what it also does is it unlocks heritage a little bit more, which has fairy ring on the label. But that's been our kind of go-to product for a number of years, and actually we need some rotation partners for fairy ring to get the very best out of it. Now, from an advice point of view on fairy ring, we're looking for soil temperatures of around 12 to 15. Now, this year that hit us down this end of the country in the south around that first week of June. We went from very cold temperatures all through April and May, and then we took off. Normally, we're much closer to the beginning of May with that. So look for those optimum temperatures. And Henry's right, what we're doing is we're reducing fairy ring. Fairy ring isn't a disease that's killing turf, it's a disease that's altering the state of the soil, and that altered state of the soil is impacting how turf grows. So we are in a long-term management situation on how to deal with that. So yeah, really useful tool in the armory. It's not on the label at the moment, so you need to be careful about that. But it gives us a good opportunity going forward to get better control of fairy ring. Okay, so movement point of view, why are these movement properties that I was talking about so important? And during periods of active growth, systemic fungicides are required to move into new growth. There's no point in just getting absorbed in, but then when you've got new leaf tissue, it not going into those. So we need that formulation that can help with that happening. My screen's not moving. There we go. Right, so in order to protect those new stems and leaves, they need to be able to move systemically from stems to leaf axils. That's how systemics work. We want them to move upwards from the crown, and we want to protect new growth and established older leaves. We want this to move through the plant. But what we don't want to do is have a product that moves too fast, and we don't want those active ingredients to accumulate in the leaf tip, because in agriculture, that's not so much of an issue. In a wheat plant, it doesn't matter. You're quite happy for it to move up through the plant and for it to concentrate at the top of the plant. But in turf, what we're doing is we are regularly removing the tip of that plant. So we're impacting the longevity of a fungicide, by physically removing it with our mowers. So when we have a fungicide in turf, we don't want it to move too quickly and all congregate at the top of the leaf. If it moves too slow, then it doesn't keep up with the speed of growth and new tissue is unprotected. So getting the speed right on this is really important. We got a study here to look at that. So what we did in this situation, we took some 4-inch square pots of ryegrass. We used a glasshouse situation, a much easier way to control this kind of thing. And we used a track sprayer at 250 litres a hectare. So this is as close as we can get to in a lab situation to applying how you would in real life. So the track sprayer would physically be mounted on a rail up above this, and it would just spray across, very similar to a sprayer would in real life. Now, at 1, 3 and 10 days after treatment, we sampled these pots to look at them, and we looked at and broke down these leaf tissues into these sections. So we cut it down into base, base to mid, mid to tip, and tip, in order to look at how much active ingredient there was in these areas afterwards. And here are the results. So this is 3 days after application, and this is what we achieved. Looking at the solatinol element of the product, we were seeing around 20% in this base section after, oops, sorry, I've gone forward on, there we go, 3 days. Yet we were looking at just over 20% in this base section after 3 days, so there's 20% in there. In the mid to base, we were a little bit more. Mid to tip, we were up closer to 25%, and in the tip around 20%. Now that's just purely down to how good the application was. I suspect there's less in the tip because there is a smaller target to hit. So similar trends with the difenoconazole. This is really representative of the quality of the application. And so we saw a nice broad range across over 3 days. Now, what we're interested in is how does that active ingredient pan itself out over time, because we want longevity out of these fungicides. So at day 10, we were really excited to see it hadn't moved much. We'd seen a little bit more go into the leaf tip, but in general, we were in a very similar place to where we were on day 3. And that is really positive news for a fungicide, because that plant is growing and it's moving. So it's very stable within the leaf for a prolonged protection. Now, what we've got here is the actual quantity of active ingredient. Rather than a percentage of what's there, this is the weight of that active ingredient. And you can see on day 1, you can see that downturn towards the tip, because we've got that narrower surface towards the tip to aim at. But by 10, we've got this really nice even distribution throughout the plant. And the two active ingredients work very well together because they are nicely matched to do the same thing. So from an application point of view, we need to make the very most of this. We want to apply preventatively to early curatively. The earlier we can get in before disease, the better effect we're going to have, because the population levels haven't increased to a point where it's going to become challenging. We want to get in. Your product rate is 3 litres a hectare. And there's a wide range of water volumes we've tested this at to see if you can get the best out of it. 250 to 700 litres a hectare. LERAP 3-star nozzle, that is on the label. It's a restriction that they've put in place. We have gone back to them and tried to challenge it. We haven't had a response yet. And from a timing point of view, we do have 2 systemics in there. So we want to see active growth going on. But depending on where you are in the country, active growth can be at a wide period of the year. Now, I would probably question the March period this year, and I don't think we saw much active growth in April, or even if active growth started in May. But pretty much that growth period is when this is the product you want to go to. From a resistance management point of view, we want to be careful how many numbers of sequential applications of Acelepryn. We want to reduce our applications of SDHIs to no more than 2 in a row. Now, there are other SDHIs on the market, so just be aware of your program. And these SDHIs should contribute no more than 1/3 of the total applications made in the season. So good rotation of products is important. From a buffer zone point of view, there is a 6-metre buffer zone. I don't think it's going to affect anyone in tennis, but all applications must be made with this freestyle Lee wrap rated nozzle. The buffer zone cannot be reduced below 6 metres in any circumstances. So that's all about thinking about if you have any streams, ponds, or anything like that in and around your areas. The Lee wrap rated nozzles, all Lee wrap rated nozzles can be found on the health and safety website. Just do a search for Lee wrap spray equipment, and you can see in there we have the Syngenta range of nozzles in there, but there are some restrictions which are a bit frustrating, looking at nozzle heights, boom heights and pressures. But have a look at those, read the label and have a chat with us if you need some help to make that work. And why has that been put in place? And it's because active ingredient in the wider world, agriculture as well, is being found in non-target crops. So there will continue to be a big drive as products are registered to eliminate drift. Nozzle technology plays a big part in helping us reduce drift. So nozzle technology is going to have to catch up, and the regulatory framework is driving us all to do that with these new products. But it's great news, and that is why products are getting formulated better and better and better, so we can see these wide range of water volumes being effective, which allows us to spray in the best way possible. Our recommendation is 500 litres a hectare. Now, you'll need to look at your kit to understand exactly what water volumes you can get, but we do have a wide range available to us. And a little bit of advice on rain fastness. Some of our products, we're quite comfortable to stand up and say, yep, 1 hour after application, the product is rain fast. What we found with this product was very simple. We did a lot of trial work and we looked at it, and the longer you leave it on the leaf before rain, the better the results you get. So yes, if it rains 15 minutes afterwards, you will still be more effective than if you hadn't sprayed it. But if you can leave it for 2 hours, you'll be even more effective. So the longer you can leave it to dry on the leaf, the more effective it is going to be. There are other products, like I say, where we could say differently, and it is only an hour before you don't see any downturn, but that isn't the case with this one. So from a spectrum of activity, I appreciate in tennis we may have a wide range of different diseases that I see in golf on a more regular basis. The label does have a restricted number of diseases on it, but if we pull the data in from the States, because we can look at what a wide, broad spectrum fungicide this is. We've got really good effectiveness on brown patch, on white ear patch, on grey leaf spot. Leaf spot, it's got 2-star rating on it, which is still pretty good, but it's not the best out there. Grey snow mold, red thread, fairy ring and takel, all 3-star rated diseases. We will continue to do the work in sports turf to bring those to the label where it's appropriate, but we have got strong activity. Just goes to support how broad spectrum it is. There is some nice data out there on leaf spot though. 2 applications against leaf spot has given us some good control. But we are working harder to support the leaf spot program, and grey leaf spot is something that we recognise in the warmer areas of the country we are seeing increasingly. So we are doing a lot of work in other areas of Europe looking at grey leaf spot because they are more prone due to the temperatures, and then hopefully we can transport that data over because it's not a regular occurrence for us. So where does it fit? This is kind of more of a broad spectrum talk about how to slot your fungicide program together. We have a pretty broad portfolio now of products available. We've got Heritage, Heritage Max. FR321 is our 1-box solution, which is a combination of Heritage, Medallion and Rider. We've now obviously got Acelepryn that we're bringing to the market, in Strata Elite and Medallion. And what we've done here is plot all of the label stated diseases and what level of control we achieve. Now, every time these products go through registration, depending on what office they get registered in around Europe historically, they will get granted different levels of control depending on the trial results we get. And what's really interesting for us was the UK office, because we have to register in the UK now we are outside of Europe, granted it moderate control on microdocium patch, reduction on anthracnose and reduction on dollar spot. Now, we fully expected the anthracnose and the dollar spot labels because we just did not have the level of data, the number of trials to support it. So we expected that. The moderate control really surprised us. So we went back and we looked through the assessment dossier to understand exactly why we were in that position. And we have to submit a huge amount of trials when we submit or apply for these things. And what we've got here, and we have to apply with a standard. So we have to take another product from the industry that is seen to be the standard product for that disease, and we have to put it in the same trials. And we did 17 of those with Iprodine in there as a comparable product. And throughout those 17 trials, the mean disease application, so we weren't starting from a curative position, we were starting curative, we weren't starting preventative. We saw better levels of control with Acelepryn at around 70% control across all of those 17 trials than we did with the Iprodine at 20 litres a hectare. So we were surprised that they only granted moderate control, and we have gone back and challenged that. When we're comparing it against our products and we compared it against Instrata, out of the 4 trials that we did and we used that as the standard, you can start to see the level of data we have to put together to get these things through. Again, starting with mean disease at start of application at 3%, so a curative application, which isn't what we would recommend in the real world. We were seeing 80% control with Acelepryn and 80% control with Instrata. So it shows you the league that this product is in. It really is up there. So if we want to build a program, it's worth us looking at the whole portfolio and understanding how that pulls together. So we've got 4 heritage that you can apply. You've got 4 heritage max that you can apply. You've got 4 FR321 you can apply, but because they're all of similar technology, they're all strobe-based products, you can only choose 4 from there, up to a maximum of 1/3 of your program in order to meet the resistance requirements. I've got 2 Acelepryn that you have available to you, 2 Instrata Elites and 4 medallions. So you have quite a broad range of products to bolt together. Now, every program is different, so it's really difficult for me to give you advice on how to use it. But what I can do is advise on where they fit in the heat spectrum on this temperature kind of growth spectrum. And in the warmest situations, I would start a program with heritage. Now, this isn't a program recommendation as such, it's you understanding where they all fit in that scale. I would then look to Acelepryn. So heritage is pure systemic. Acelepryn is 2 systemics, 1 is very, very slow. And I look to FR321, that's giving us that combination of the azoxystrobin in heritage and the fludioxonil in medallion to do 2 things at the same time. From a rotation point of view, we then want to go in through this autumn period through that cooler temperature with Acelepryn to keep moving things around. Then you can go back in with heritage still if the temperatures are allowing. You then move into this kind of transitional phase of temperature where things start dropping off temperature-wise. That's where Instrata Elite falls into your programs. As we move into the cooler periods of the year, we want to be steering towards medallion, which is a contact product, so no growth. That's when we want contacts, not systemics. If we pick back up a little at that period of time, Instrata Elite will do that job for us, jumping back to medallion. This is all about warm to cold. This isn't a program recommendation. This is understanding the time of the year and the challenges you get and piecing this together. So from a disease control, again, most of this is done in Gulf. But we've got some really nice stuff. We looked at the anthracnose trial earlier. I'll have a look at this one here, which is looking at fuzz again at STRI 2016. What we did in this situation, we used 2 Acelepryn, a program of 2 Acelepryn compared to the Chipco. And the red line is the untreated control, and you can see throughout this program, we were seeing some serious microdochium pressure. We hit 40% microdochium at one point in this study. Both the Acelepryn program and the Chipco program kept us down lower. Now, Neither of them kept us at zero. We didn't start at zero, but this is where we need to look to other technologies to support these products. Even looking back at old school technology at 20 litres a hectare isn't enough in these extreme disease times to pull things together as clean as we would ideally like. So we need to piece that puzzle together with other pieces of the jigsaw. So let's go back to that. So from a turf safety and compatibility point of view, this is critical because you need to know these products are super safe for your turf. Very well formulated, no residue, no foam. Compatibility, we have seen no compatibility issues done with this with the whole range of ICL products. So it's nice for you to know that you can tank mix those from a compatibility point of view. We would always recommend going separately. This is not a recommendation, but there are no compatibility issues. From a safety point of view, we did over 75 trials in 9 countries. Spring, summer, autumn and winter, no phytotoxicity ever recorded on a wide range of species, including all the ones you are going to be using in tennis. Application rate of 3 litres a hectare. In a lot of the trials, we would have doubled that to test what happens if we get boom overlap wrong, and we have never seen any turf quality or phytotoxicity issues at all. From a germination point of view, there is no detrimental effect and no beneficial effect either. So a nice product to use around germination. Now on the back of this, because of the label, there is always a number of frequently asked questions. So I've tried to pull them together in this to go through. The label is a challenging one. It is a broad spectrum foliar fungicide with both contact and systemic properties for moderate control of fusarium patch, dollar spot and anthracnose on sports turf, stadiums and intensively managed sports turf. Now what does that mean? That is the challenge here. What does that highlighted phrase mean? So what does enclosed professional sports turf mean? Sorry, go back. Oh, my computer. There we go. It means sports stadiums or other sporting venues with fencing or barriers that will prevent the entry of wildlife. That could include cricket, bowls, rugby, tennis. So there's good news for you guys. A lot of your situations, assuming it's fenced or barriered off to prevent the entry of wildlife, you can use it. What does wildlife include? Does it include birds? No, it doesn't. Wildlife refers to large herbivorous mammals like rabbits and hares that would feed on treated turf. Birds are excluded because they are not taking their diet solely from turf. Can we use it on golf courses that are fenced off? No, CRD is specifically asked for all reference to golf courses to be excluded from the label. It's really nice to be talking to some different people and focusing on some different sports rather than golf, which tends to be our normal market. Can we apply to a fenced sports turf venue, bowls and tennis? Yes, in situations where they're fully enclosed. So this is the key bit. If you're going to use it for tennis, they need to be fully enclosed with fencing or surrounding structures that would prevent the access of large herbivorous animals, mainly rabbits and hares. Why was it refused in golf? This is an interesting question that inevitably is going to come up, particularly if you have a venue where you've got tennis and golf courses. It's important you understand. CRD did not accept our argument that lagomorphs, which I now understand is a rabbit and a hare, would not feed exclusively from the treated areas, greens and tees on a golf course. So the modelling looks at where rabbits and hares are feeding, and they are assuming that they are going to take all of their diet from the treated areas. Now, other parts of Europe have accepted the argument that they do not in golf, whereas the UK has asked us to prove it. Now, for very keen-eyed people, we may be aware that it has been approved for golf in Ireland, but not in the UK. Ireland accepted the argument that rabbits and hares don't feed significantly on greens and tees. They did not, whereas the UK did not accept that argument. So why is it approved in football here, but it's not allowed in football anywhere else in Europe? So we have a wider range of places we can use it in the UK. So CRD in the UK take a slightly different approach with regards to modelling of drainage water and different approach to risk assessments to other countries. So now we're getting products registered in the UK for UK use. We are going to begin to see some subtle differences tease out in how these labels look. I think that's pretty much the conversation done, or the presentation done. So just conclusion wise, it's really nice to be launching a new fungicide to the market, particularly one as good as this. We've got 2 modes of action in there. This activity in the organic matter, we've got great formulation, good balanced systemic movement in there, excellent stability on the leaf, a new chemistry for us and a new mode of action, and curative and preventative properties. Thank you for listening. And I hope you understand why I get so excited about launching a fungicide. It doesn't happen very often, does it, Henry?
No, it doesn't. No, but yeah, good. It's interesting, and you know, so yeah, some are sort of or use in growing conditions, mainly to systemic to inside the plant, but it does have activity outside the plant, which makes it good for soil-borne diseases like fairy rings. Interesting to see red thread on there. Really versatile in terms of its application, you know, in terms of the water rates, and so you're free to choose the water rate that suits where you want the active to go. And yeah, really good, and just again fits in with the overall plan. But I think the fairy ring might be of interest to a few people on the call. So there's no more questions. I'll just quickly mention Acelepryn. While we're on that, and I've been asked to do this just to sort of give an update of the situation, because Acelepryn is an insecticide that's been given emergency authorization in the last few years for the control of Chafer grubs and leatherjackets. At the moment, we've got an emergency authorization running. They last for 120 days or for the control of Chafer grubs, but the areas and the amount that you can use are restricted, because an emergency authorization is granted if there's serious economic impact of the pests, there's no alternative, or there's significant issues in terms of health and safety. And so what you have to do, and this is what I do, you have to apply. It's quite a long, convoluted and detailed application supporting your justification for an emergency authorization. And so the areas that we've been granted are sort of airfields, potential health issues, health and safety issues, race courses, because a number of race meetings were cancelled, so it was clear that there was a potential significant economic impact, and golf, where again, significant areas have been affected, and golf, where Chafer grubs and leatherjackets are serious, there's potential for massive damage. And so in terms of justifying those, I kind of gained support from the Jockey Club, the Airports Authority, and BIG, and a number of other people to go in with the application. And the reason why tennis isn't on it at the moment is not because is really because it's never been suggested to me that there's an emergency going on in tennis. Now you might sort of say that it's different, but the criteria for approval is really high. We did try to sort of overcome this kind of limitation in terms of the areas of use by asking in the last 2 years for special dispensation to be made for international sporting venues that fall outside the authorizations that have been given. It might be either golf courses want to treat a greater area than they're permitted at the moment, if they've got an international golf tournament, or venues that stage international tournaments, which would be quite a number of the lawn tennis. The lawn tennis season does kind of cover a number of venues on the run up to the to the sort of championships. So but that wasn't signed off by any of the home nations. We thought we put a good justification in there that there would be very limited use, and that only the use would be justified in exceptional circumstances supported by the sports governing body, but they wouldn't sign it off. And so we tried, we tried for you for a certain degree, but the product is in for full approval. It's been in for full approval for a number of years now, and we're hoping for some communication on whether full approval has been granted. So at the moment, Acelepryn is not approved for use on the emergency authorisation for use on tennis courts in particular. We've got an application for an emergency approval for the Leatherjacket later on in the year to come in, but again, that would just be for airfields, horse race courses and gallops and golf courses. And that application's already gone in. If it's felt that but full approval may be granted in the meantime, which would then sort of overcome any emergency approvals. Yeah, we've got a feeling that, or we've become disheartened that the full approval is kind of being delayed so long because of Brexit and everything else, that we might have to go for an emergency approval next year. If you feel that there is an emergency situation going on within tennis that can be justified, I am perfectly happy to include that in this year's applications, but we would need evidence, and we would need figures. If it's an economic issue, we would need figures and this, that, and the other. But feel free. I have to talk to you about it and talked about the extent of the issue and whether we feel like it's worth including, because in terms of the amount of product that will be used, I mean, commercially there wouldn't be a huge kind of benefit, but this isn't about commercial gain. This is about resolving situations that are causing serious problems. And so if you kind of feel that tennis does need that insecticide because it's causing because Chafer grubs and Leatherjackets are causing really big problems for you, then happy to talk about that and possibly include it in next year's applications if full approval doesn't occur in the meantime. If full approval does occur, we would hope that tennis will be fully included in that, or we expect that tennis will be fully included in that. But you never can tell. You can tell with the Acelepryn approval that it was unexpected what areas were being granted, and you can imagine that drives a company like Syngenta up the wall. That you give all the justifications and put all the trial work together, put the dossier together for approval, and it comes back a little bit random. And it's not just Syngenta that's suffering from this. There's one or two other sort of situations where it seems that the sort of the approvals are a little bit strange at the moment. So we know they're under pressure. But anyway, so just get in contact with me if you think if it's worth including, or you think there's a justification to include it. Okay, so that is it. So we've talked about stress management, and in particular the use of aminos, because stress is huge in tennis. It's kind of like, it couldn't be more amplified, I don't think. So hopefully you sort of understand what HiCure is all about and how to use it. You've got a new fungicide for disease control, which might have implications for fairy ring, but it's certainly broad spectrum and could well help during the playing season if there's a serious issue going on, or as part of those end of season renovations. And we'll keep you posted on the Acelepryn. So hope that's been okay for you. If there's no other questions, we will call it a day. We will circulate the video for this, but I think lastly, it's thank you to Glenn for going through all that information so manfully. There's a great deal of information there, and maybe everyone needs to sort of take a look at the videos just to sort of make sure they get everything out that they need to. But there's a couple of really good products there that hopefully will form a part of your integrated turf management plans. Thank you, Glenn.
Welcome. Thank you, Henry.
All the best, fellas. We'll sign off now.
See you later.